From London to Tokyo, the McDonald's signs and Starbucks logos may have you convinced that there isn't any unique culture left out there. But that's definitely not the case. You just have to know where to look. Though some are deep in the jungles or on distant islands, there are many remote tribes, some even without contact with the outside world, who continue customs and traditions that you might find, well, just a little bit strange. Let's dive into them. The Coro people, sometimes also called the Kalufu, live in a perpetual witch hunt, and when they decide someone is a witch or kahua, they eat him. They're always men. In fact, the ever-present danger of being accused of witchcraft has driven the Korowai to great heights. They live in impressive tree houses on long wooden stilts designed specifically to be arson-proof. Despite their dramatic lifestyle, no one knew the Korowai existed and vice versa until the 1970s when they were contacted by Dutch missionaries. They live deep in the jungles of the south of Papua, the large island divided down the middle between Indonesia and Papua New Guinea. While their population is estimated between 3,000 and 4,000, it's likely that many of the members of the tribe live deeper in the jungle and have little knowledge of or contact with the outside world. The Korowai are hunter-gatherers and very adept at tracking and killing animals from wild boar to lizards. They also practice shift cultivation, where they grow crops but only in one spot at a time, thereby shifting their agriculture. However, they're far from pastoral pacifists. Conflict is a major part of Korowai life, and their treehouse living is not idyllic. It's for defense. Clans within the tribe fight amongst each other regularly, and being up high helps you keep from getting kidnapped or murdered in your sleep. This is just one of the reasons Korowai don't regularly live past middle age, the other, of course, being disease. The Indonesian jungle is rife with insects, parasites, and germs that are just waiting to kill you, but the Korowai don't know they exist. Instead, when someone dies of malaria, they blame a witch and kill him. Often, the accusation of the sick person is enough to condemn the supposed witch, and when the men of the tribe capture him, they chop off his head with an axe, and then they eat him. If you ask a Korowai person, this isn't cannibalism because the witches are not human. The witch hunting is the primary source of Korowai conflict, but they aren't big on outsiders either, particularly white ones, whom they refer to as laleo, or ghost demons. The Korowai are very proud and protective of their culture and tradition, such as festivals devoted to the Sago grub, keeping pigs as pets, and their belief in the reincarnation of the dead. In one of their myths, the mountain god warns them that outsiders will try to change the Korowai's customs, and if they succeed, the world will be destroyed in an earthquake. As a result, the Korowai are much interested in learning about the outside world and can be quite hostile, even lethal, to any laleo who approaches them. The Amazon rainforest is home to over 100 uncontacted tribes, all threatened with either extinction or assimilation by encroaching civilization. However, none are as close to disappearing as the Awa. Indigenous to the Maranhão state in central Brazil, the Awa became nomadic in the 19th century as encroachment by European settlers destroyed much of the forest that they relied on for survival. Indeed, their passion for the forest is what truly makes the Awa unique, and for most of us, probably a little bit strange. The Awa survive by bow hunting the plethora of species that inhabit the jungle, but they don't just eat anything. Certain animals are taboo, like the capybara and the harpy eagle. Others are said to bring illness, like bats. They also never eat their pets, and they have a lot of pets. Awa adopt just about any baby creature they find abandoned in the forest and raise them to maturity before returning them to the wild. For many of these creatures, such as monkeys and agotis, this requires breastfeeding, which the women of the tribe do just as they would their own children. They also cuddle with coatis in their hammocks, feed parakeet hatchlings fruit from their hands, and care for fledgling owls until they can fly. The Awa know all the animals they've kept as family, and even after they're released back into the forest, they recognize the calls of the monkeys or the birds perched in the trees, and they don't hunt them. Considering the intense love for nature, it probably doesn't surprise you that most Awa names are derived from the forest as well. The tribe waits until the child is older and his or her character presents an obvious similarity with the forest and therefore a name. For example, a particularly wiggly child received the name Earthworm, and they named a little girl Dove because she liked to sing. Whimsical as it may be, the Awa's way of life makes them vulnerable. As a small tribe, anthropologists worry that something as simple as the common cold could kill the entire group. However, the real threat is the logging industry, and the Awa's range is the fastest disappearing part of the Brazilian Amazon. The tribe's range was officially demarcated and deeded to them in 2003, but that hasn't fully prevented illegal logging activity. In 2011, loggers destroyed an Awa camp and burned an 8-year-old Awa girl alive when she stumbled upon them, her first and last contact with outsiders. Actions such as these have reduced the Awa numbers to just 350, only about 60 of whom remain uncontacted. With a population of over 30,000, the Suri of southern Ethiopia are far from uncontacted, but even in spite of laws banning some of their traditions, they have maintained their unique culture over centuries. They generally live in agricultural villages ranging from a few dozen to a few thousand people, governed by councils of male elders. Men are ranked loosely by age, with unmarried men or Tige achieving junior elder or Rora status through a dramatic rite of passage involving starvation and whipping. The villages of chiefs known as Komoru, but they have little power beyond prestige in the councils, and Suri value their personal autonomy and independence. Even if you haven't heard of the Suri, you've probably seen a photo of one of the women and their striking lip piercings. At puberty, most women fully remove their lower teeth so they can pierce their lower lip and insert a plate. They then replace the plates with increasingly large ones, stretching out the lips over time. A large plate and correspondingly stretched lip are ideals of female beauty. Similarly, the women decorate their bodies with patterns of dotted scars that they create by slicing the skin with razors. As for men, if you want to attract a mate, you have to fight for her with a stick. The Suri practice a type of stick fighting called donga. At first glance, it looks like men trying to hit each other with really long wooden sticks, and while that is in fact their goal, but it's actually an elaborate sport and martial art with specific rules. The Suri organize donga tournaments, especially around harvest time, called Sagin. Young men practice with dedication ahead of time to hone their skills. Two villagers meet on the tournament pitch, and then the men square off against each other until they found a worthy opponent to fight one-on-one. Two opponents try to strike each other with their sticks. The match ends when one man is knocked unconscious or concedes, and there are referees to make sure everyone stays safe, relatively speaking. It's against the rules to strike a man on the ground, and killing a man results in your family's banishment, even if it was an accident. Nevertheless, deaths do occur, especially due to internal organ damage after blows to the belly. More commonly, men suffer injuries from broken bones to lost eyes. Despite the risks, men readily take part in donga because your performance in the Sangin gains you considerable respect, especially with the ladies. The women circle up to watch the men fight, chatting, giggling, and checking out their favorites. And one more thing about the Suri, they love cows. A man's status is also tied to the size of his cattle herd, the average being 30 to 40, and he cannot marry until he's had enough to pay his bride's family. They don't kill and eat them though, but use the cattle for milk. Men will defend their herds to death, and if a cow does pass away, the Suri sing mournful songs for them. Now we go back to Indonesia and Papua, though this time to the mountainous highlands at the center of the island. Here live the Dany people, a fairly large tribe of around 90,000. While some clans of the tribe on the outskirts of their territory were contacted by Dutch explorers as early as 1909, the bulk of the tribe was not discovered by Westerners until an accidental sighting by a zoology expedition flying over the Grand Valley in 1938. Despite attempts by the Indonesian government to modernize them, the tribal populations in the most remote parts of the mountains have little contact with the outside world and, as a result, maintain some strange ancient traditions. The Dany are agricultural and cultivate local crops, namely sweet potato, banana, and cassava. Pigs are the primary source of protein eaten at large festivals where dominant men earn respect based on the number of pigs they slaughter and feed to the population. This is all facilitated by ancient technologies such as stone axes, which also have a more disturbing use. Clans with the Dany tribe have traditionally fought quite a bit. Interestingly, the fighting isn't over territory or resources, but it's mostly symbolic. The main goal is to humiliate and dominate the opposing village, often killing certain people over personal grudges. Aside from serving as a weapon in these battles, the stone axe is an important part of ritual mourning afterward. Tradition holds that when a Dany woman loses a close male relative, she must cut off the top joint of one of her fingers at the funeral. Known as ikepalin, this ritual involves tying off the tip of the finger for 30 minutes until it goes numb and then chopping it off and cauterizing the wounds. The woman then either stores the fingertip or burns it. As well as showing her grief, ikepalin is supposed to ward off the spirit of the deceased. Both the interclan warfare and ritual of ikepalin are now officially banned in Indonesia, and the practice is much less common. Nevertheless, if you visit the more accessible territories of the Dany people, you can see many elderly women missing the tips of some or most of their fingers. Other traditions have been even more difficult for the Indonesian government to abolish, especially the keteka, aka the penis gourd. Many tribes on Papua wear keteka, and you can usually tell a tribe apart by their gourd's design. The Dany wear long, thin, hard-shell koteka made from dried, hollowed-out water pumpkins. Aside from serving as clothing to cover the genitals, the koteka is ornamental and fashionable and denotes tribal affiliation. In the early 70s, the Indonesian government sought to eradicate the koteka custom and convince the Dany and other tribes to wear modern clothing such as shorts and dresses. With a budget of $720,000 or nearly $5.5 million today, Operation Koteka, i.e. Operation Penis Gourd, aimed to clothe some 500,000 natives around the island. However, the Dany men were ashamed to wear clothes, and besides, they didn't know how to. Government officials found tribespeople wearing shorts and skirts as hats and using dresses as bags. Plus, having lived so long without clothing and lacking the knowledge to do the laundry, the dirty clothes caused skin irritation and disease. The program was abandoned, and Dany men continue wearing koteka today. Far from abolished, the practice is now even taught in schools. First recorded contact between outside civilization and the Sentinelese people occurred in 1867 when the merchant vessel Nineveh sank off the coast of North Sentinel Island. Just 60 square kilometers or 23 square miles in area, the island isn't but 3/5 the size of Disney World, and it lies some 40 kilometers or 25 miles from the main Andaman Islands and a full 1,200 kilometers or 750 miles south of the Indian Bengal coast. In other words, it doesn't seem like a place that would be inhabited. However, the crew of the Nineveh quickly learned that it was indeed inhabited. While eating breakfast on the beach, a group of Sentinelese suddenly charged them with bows and arrows. The captain fled in a boat and came back with a Royal Navy rescue team who found the crew shaken up but otherwise fine, having fought off their attackers. Further attempts at contact didn't go so well. Throughout the colonial period, everyone from British naval officers to escaped convicts tried to reach North Sentinel, and they all met the same response. Many of them ended up dead. By the 1900s, colonial officials had decided that the Sentinelese were a tribe which slays every stranger, however inoffensive, on sight. After Indian independence in 1947, the Indian government declared the island a tribal reserve, but continued attempts at contact. However, the new goal was now academic, and the first excursions were led by T.N. Pandit, a professional anthropologist, including one in 1974 with a National Geographic film crew. The scientists and documentarians tried to forge a relationship through gift-giving, but this just resulted in the director getting an arrow in the thigh. The bowmen laughed triumphantly, while other tribe members destroyed some of the gifts, killing and burying the pig and the doll, for example, while taking others, like the coconuts and metal cookware. Anthropologists still know very little about the Sentinelese, even after a century and a half. It's assumed that they're part of a larger group of Andanamese people, likely related to the Jarawa and Ongi. These people were once thought to be related to the small group of just a few hundred humans who were the first to migrate out of Africa and along the southern coast of Asia 60,000 years ago. More recent DNA studies suggest they more likely migrated from Southeast Asia around 26,000 years ago, but if you ask me, it's still a pretty long time to be on the same island. Either way, scientists can't exactly confirm the Sentinelese relation with so little data. Expeditions have involved taking other Andanamese tribespeople to North Sentinel, but the Sentinelese act toward them with equal hostility, and their languages are not mutually intelligible, suggesting they've been isolated for hundreds, if not thousands of years. The isolation appears to have led to insular dwarfism, and Sentinelese men measure only about 5 feet 3 inches tall or 1.6 meters. Nevertheless, they appear healthy, muscular, and well-nourished. Brief views of their camp suggest they eat a lot of mollusks and crabs that they catch from tide pools, although they also hunt terrestrial animals. Their living structures consist of lean-tos, and they know how to build canoes. They've come to value metal from outside gifts and shipwrecks, but don't have any knowledge of metallurgy. They primarily use the metal for arrowheads, and they're skilled archers and bowmen. Much of this knowledge of the Sentinelese culture comes from the peaceful contact finally initiated by the anthropologist Madhumala Chattopadhyay in 1991. The first woman to visit her island, her and her team took gifts of coconuts to the Sentinelese. One tribesman aimed his bow at the scientist, but a tribeswoman lifted her arm to stop him. The tribe then approached the expedition party and accepted the gifts hand to hand. However, the Indian government didn't want people thinking they could freely visit North Sentinel and limited the scientific expedition starting in 1994. Whatever understanding Chattopadhyay brokered doesn't seem to have stuck, because in 2006 the Sentinelese readily killed 2 Indian fishermen who accidentally drifted into their territory and then attacked the helicopter that came to retrieve their bodies. Then, in 2018, John Allen Chow, a Christian missionary from Alabama, illegally traveled to the island by canoe after paying local fishermen to bring him within rowing distance. His first attempts at contact were immediately met with hostility. When he tried to speak, the Sentinelese laughed at him, and a boy shot an arrow at him that was only stopped by the Bible Chow was holding at his chest. Finally, the fishermen saw the tribespeople dragging his dead body along the beach. As is their stated policy, the Indian government declined to press murder charges against the Sentinelese. Although Sentinelese hostility might seem strange, a look at other nearby Andamanese tribes makes you wonder if they actually have the best strategy. After colonialism, infectious diseases ravaged the indigenous population who had no immunity, as did epidemics of alcohol and opioid abuse. By 1931, the Jangal were totally extinct. The Great Andamanese, who consisted of 10 distinct groups totaling 10,000 in 1789, are now just 59 individuals living on the Strait Island. In the end, this is a somber reminder that the cultural traditions and behaviors that we may view as weird usually have generations of wisdom behind them. These tribes deserve the respect and freedom to stay strange and stay remote if that's what they want.